Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about session -2. That's right. So you're aware of session 0, but have you heard about session -2? You're about to. It's a reality in the tabletop role-playing game scene. This is where we have landed. It's pretty incredible. Let's dig into this. Okay. I am truly amazed that we have arrived here, but session -2 is a very real thing. So let me explain it. All right, so today what we're going to talk about, to get to talk about session -2, we need to talk about a very special game, a really wonderful game. I am reading through Kids on Brooms. Kids on Brooms is a fantastic role-playing game with some very strange attachments to it. Right, within the game itself, but its structure is a little strange, but it's really fantastic. So first of all, Kids on Brooms, what is it? Who made it? Blah, blah, blah. Kids on Brooms is made by Renegade Games. They made one of the most innovative tabletop role-playing games I've ever seen, with one of the most innovative settings, and that was Overlight. Overlight is a fantastic game you've probably never played. It's really brilliant and beautiful. But it's very flawed. It had a very poor execution. Its art is not just bad; it's confusing, and the game and its rules are so arcane and frankly unplayable. The world is gorgeous and intriguing. The rules are just terrible, and the art is pretty bad. So it's a fantastic setting with real poor execution on rules and art. But Renegade Games they're dedicated to making some pretty unusual, pretty cool tabletop role-playing games. Kids on Bikes is a famous tabletop role-playing game. I met the creator. I actually went to a special event where he actually demoed the game in Philadelphia at a local board game shop, board game cafe. It was really amazing. It was a really awesome night. I got to shake his hand. This is before pandemic days. But I'm reading through Kids on Brooms, and Kids on Brooms is it's basically Harry Potter with the serial number filed off, and it is fantastic. It really does a great job of equipping you to run a Harry Potter game, and that's no small feat because you can't really actually officially in any way play a Harry Potter tabletop role-playing game. It's the holy grail of tabletop role-playing game licenses. No company has ever come even close to licensing the product. And, Harry Potter's going to be 20 years old, right? And no TTRPG company in the world can even touch the license, right? So Kids on Brooms will let you play Harry Potter as a tabletop role-playing game, which that's really exciting to me. I'm a huge Harry Potter fan, and primarily of the books and then the movies, everything. I'm just a huge fan, right? So Kids on Brooms is really fantastic role-playing game, but it's got some strangeness in it, and the reality is it introduces session -2. So how did we get to session -2, and what is session -2? Well, session -2 is, you got it. So you want to play a role-playing game? If you bought into the session 0 nonsense like the rest of virtually every D&D commentator and so many D&D commentators are like, oh, you just got to run session 0. It just smooths the runway. I've always been against session 0 for one reason. Session 0 is a committee to play a role-playing game, right? And nothing could be less fun or more exciting or less adventurous, right? It's the worst, right? And I've always felt that way, and I believe Kids on Brooms really proves my point that session 0 always absolutely sucked and was a terrible idea every time it was said. And by the way, if you think I'm wrong, go check out Jennifer Kretschmer. Jennifer Kretschmer has said that a lot of session 0s were a whole bunch of dungeon masters and game masters asking their players to talk about traumas, right? That's a pretty hot take on session 0 and how bad they suck, right? That's really bad, right? And we did it for 10 years, right? Session 0 is the worst. It is just so bad from so many levels, right? Well, if you had bought into session 0, right, which the Kids on Bikes and Kids on Brooms, same creators, right? They were all over it, right? They're just the pinnacle of session 0 crowd. We all need to discuss playing this role-playing game for a whole session, right? Which to me is it's such nonsense, right? So, and actually I say right, but I understand a lot of people are not down with that and don't really agree. That's okay, all right? So here's the thing. So how do we get to a session 0, right? It's brilliant, right? So if you buy into session 0, right, which this game does, they then say, here's what should happen, right? You need to discuss the setting with your players. That happens in session 0s, usually. But here, for Kids on Bikes, they don't explain it this way, but if you read what they're saying, session -2 and session -1 and session 0, and then your first session of play is literally the sequence, right? So how do you get to a session 0? Session -2. You get to a session -2 by discussing your setting, right? And then you set the rules for your setting. Now you're ready to have your session 0, right? Because your session 0 is just going to be to discuss the boundaries of your players, right? So now you're going to discuss the boundaries of your players, right? So, but here's the thing. In Jennifer Kretschmer's new world, understanding that session 0 was always a terrible idea, and you're just saying, hey, all you players, let's all talk about our traumas around the table openly. You can't do that anymore. Now you have to determine what your session 0 is going to be like. Is it going to be you gathering lists from your players, anonymous list, and then the dungeon, and then the game master aggregating those anonymous lists, and then telling everybody these are the forbidden topics of the game, which I have anonymously collected and not asked you to talk about your traumas, and now I'm telling you in session 0 what the boundaries are, and then we're going to play in regular session 1, right? So session -2 is set your setting. Session -1 is determining if you can have open communication in session 0. Because now a lot of people understand you can't, right? Because if you're triggering traumas in session 0, you have to know that. So you need a session -2 to set the boundaries and set up session 0. Whether you can actually speak openly because you have people who are like mentally robust and thick skins, or maybe you have some people who are kind of brittle because they've had some really rough events in their life, right? And you need to do anonymous lists for session 0, and then tell everybody in session 0 what you established with the anonymous lists in session -1, or session -1 is just literally the conversation of what are we all comfortable for session 0? Well, right. So it's like session -2 to set up your setting, session -1 to determine what the structure of session 0 will be, session 0, right, which determines boundaries for all players, right, and then your regular setting. Oh boy, like that, 3 sessions before you reach the table and roll a single die. That is the definition of suck. Like that is a committee to form a committee to play a role-playing game. That is just, are you joking? Are you serious? You need 3 sessions before you could sit down and have fun with your friends? It's outrageous. I just can't believe we landed here, right? Session 0 is never a good idea. Session -2 is worse. Session -1 is worse. Session 0, and then your play session. Is this really where we landed? Now here's the thing. The guy who created Kids on Bikes and Kids on Brooms is brilliant and wonderful and has the best of intentions. And none of this is his fault. This is woke world, right? So basically, with woke, you have the best of intentions. But one of the reasons why we're in such strife right now in America is everybody wants to be woke, and then when woke gets delivered, it's so much worse than what the situation was, right? And it's so like being dragged over glass. And that's what we gotta fix. We gotta figure out how to be woke and not suck. We gotta figure out a way to make woke not suck. And that's what session -2 does. It sucks, right? All that's my opinion. What do you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Let me know in the comments below. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.